that they'd like to ask. Thank you all for joining us. Know we start getting into the summertime and the legislature's still around. Things can be your time can be stretched rather thin. So thank you for calling. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Treasurer Folwell. Treasurer.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Thank you all of you for joining us. We've had a lot of things go on since our last meeting. Obviously, with the state debt, we've issued $600 million worth of Garvey bonds. These are anticipation notes based on the federal tax revenue coming back to us, being able to issue debt based on that tax revenue. Secondly, we, through the Council of State, have approved a $300 million build-in C bond referendum, which we're currently working on to get done by the end of the fiscal year. On the pension plan, May was a horrible month for the pension plan, even though we're still up for the calendar year, and we don't have any audited numbers for that. But as we get toward June 30th, we will be looking at audited numbers for the 6 months of 2019 and for the last 12 months in the fiscal year. Continue to make progress to preserve and strengthen the pension plan, and are working with the legislature to close some things that are going on in the pension plan that I think have an impact on long-term sustainability. And on the state health plan, we have our contract, which has been approved by the Department of Insurance. That contract has been sent out by Blue Cross Blue Shield, who's our third-party administrator, and we have hundreds of folks who are signing on to the Clear Pricing Project. Also, since our last meeting, there's been lots of reports in the Wall Street Journal by Stephanie Moore and Anna Matthews and others about things that are going on in healthcare. The latest one of those is a report about an executive order by the President of the United States to, in my words, not his, to increase transparency, push the control out to the consumer, and thereby lowering healthcare cost. So with that, Frank, we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Treasurer Folwell. We had a lot of maybes, so I'm just going to open it up. Anybody would like to start with a question for the Treasurer?
Yeah, this is Dan Way. I'll start. I'm just
Dan.
wondering, Treasurer Folwell, if you've been paying attention to the dispute going on over at Vidant between them and the Board of Governors over the governance issue on the Board of Directors for the teaching hospital, and whether you're playing any role in that at all, or whether you anticipate getting involved in any way as these talks and mediation go on. I know you've had keen interest in the past when state funds and state-funded buildings were at issue, and just wondering if you have any role in this thing at all.
Well, I would say that our relationship with the Vidant Chief Executive Officer could best be characterized as soiled. And there's been lots of things that have happened over the last 2.5 years in the Treasurer's Office that relate to Vidant. I'll also say that my response to your question is very biblical. That anytime you point one finger at somebody, there's three fingers pointing back at you. And all I really care about is Vidant's ability to increase transparency, push the control out to the consumer, and lower costs for people in Eastern North Carolina. If we lower the cost for health care for people in Eastern North Carolina, that in and of itself will increase accessibility. These other issues of what Vidant has done to strip the appointment process for the Board of Governors out of their governance process, that is something obviously that's between Vidant, the General Assembly, and the Board of Governors. I had no knowledge of any provisions that are in the budget that are currently being discussed regarding that issue. But I will say that the management of Vidant continues to, as I said earlier, they point a finger at somebody, but they fail to realize there's three fingers pointing back at them. I don't have any comment about anything that's going on this governance issue, other than the fact that it's just something else that's going on. And what I really need Vidant to do is to sign our contract so that they will provide health care at a very reasonable profit to the people who teach children in Eastern North Carolina, protect citizens in Eastern North Carolina from criminals, pave roads in Eastern North Carolina, and all the other core functions of state government. The Vidant officials have our contract in their hand, and the reason I know that is that I personally delivered one and slid it across the table to the CEO of that organization. So whether Vidant wants to provide health care to the hardworking state employees, that decision now rests with them.
Okay.
Dan, you got
you've had no role at all in any of those issues involving the government?
No, and I mean, you know, you and others on this call know that I pay attention to our mat and no one else's. I was as shocked as your readers were and the rest of North Carolina when I first read that this had happened. And it's the only way I can characterize it is bizarre. But as I said earlier, what we're trying to do is we're trying to get providers to sign our contracts, and that's where 100% of our focus is.
All right.
Dan, you got anything else?
Well, you did mention you've had hundreds of people sign on already to your contracts. I'm just wondering, how is that process going? Are you feel like you're on track? You have till what, the end of June, right, for them to get their contract signed and returned?
Yeah. It's probably like me when I was in school, Dan. A lot of people wait till the last minute to study for the test. I know that didn't apply to you, Dan, but it probably applied to me. But obviously we've had some major announcements by Tryon Medical and some others. We're building a tremendous amount of momentum. We're actually making sure that people have the contract in their hand electronically, but also through snail mail.
Any concerns at all? I mean,
yeah, I mean, we want to make well, number one is, for example, I believe in the case of Tryon Medical, which is we've sent out a press release on it. Obviously, that's one entity. They're signing on behalf of dozens of doctors all at one time. So our concern, well, let me tell you how our concern is being alleviated. We have great organizations like the North Carolina Psychiatric Association that put out a major email blast to all their providers. I had somebody come up to me Sunday and said, hey, I just got your email blast from my association and I just signed up for the contract. It's for that particular person, it may result in a 30% pay increase to that provider, which was very important to them to provide mental health services. And so when we have that organization, we have other major organizations that represent thousands, not hundreds, but thousands of doctors who are sending these contracts out through email blast, and we're very excited about that.
all right.
Dan, you can follow up if you think of something else. Anybody else on the call want to ask Treasurer a question?
Dale, this is Jeff with the County Compass. Last night, this was quite unexpected. The county commissioners for Pamlico County unanimously approved a sample resolution that they had received from the Pitt County Board of County Commissioners to support Vidant health care in Eastern North Carolina. My focus on the proposed resolution was not only did the Pitt County Board of Commissioners mention the proposed cut to Medicaid reimbursement by the North Carolina State Senate, they also specifically mentioned $38 million annual cut to Vidant resulting from changes to the state health plan taking effect January 1, 2020. This proposed resolution went out to 29 counties in Eastern North Carolina. My thought when the vote came down unanimously is that they don't have the full side of the story. It would have been nice to, and I know that was not possible, but I just thought you'd find that interesting.
Well, thank you for your question, Jeff. We're in a situation where, from our side, facts matter, and we would love to have had an opportunity to address those issues. I would say that all these county commissions that may be considering this resolution, they better be asking themselves the same question that I'm asking as the state treasurer. How much are health care costs going up on them as an employer of people at the county level? They may be shocked at that answer. So this is not about supporting one particular provider of health care that happens to be named Vidant. The fact is that any elected official in any part of the state should be in favor of more accessibility and lower costs for health care, but more importantly, transparency. Now, the cuts associated with the Clear Pricing Project, and there's some dispute about those, but there are cuts. There's only one reason that any healthcare provider in North Carolina would be receiving cuts under our plan, and that is they were charging us too much. The fact is that we have thousands and thousands of doctors. We had people who came up to me at a recent primary care physician in Greensboro, who I believe she may have been from a Hosky, who said this Clear Pricing Project and the reimbursement rates are going to allow her to stay in business, because for primary care physicians, in many instances, it means a 5 to 25% pay increase. These are people who provide health care in rural North Carolina who really just want to provide health care in rural North Carolina. And they're super excited about our plan. So, and let me say this, since you've kind of opened it up, and I hope I don't go too far off with my comments here. We had no idea who we were paying. We knew who we were paying. We knew who we were spending over $3 billion a year with for healthcare and pharmaceuticals. We knew who we were paying, but we had no idea when we started the Clear Pricing Project about the differences in what people were getting paid. And what we've come to find is that there's some healthcare providers, even hospitals in eastern North Carolina, that are going to get reimbursement increases based on the Clear Pricing Project. We would have just as well, when we went through this analysis, it'd been lovely for us if Vidant actually made $2 million more dollars. But the fact is, we had no idea what they were charging us based on a percentage of Medicare. We didn't have a clue what that number was just a year ago, 12 short months ago. So the fact that they talk about there being a decline in their profit or their revenue associated with the state health plan has everything to do with the fact that they were charging us a lot more than we ever realized, period.
Jeff, you got a follow-up?
No, that's everything I had on that particular point. I'm curious what the APR is going to be on the $600 million bond issue.
It's going to be right at 2.37%, but Frank or
Garvey bonds?
Yes.
It's in the press release.
Yeah, I think it's 2.38% was the APR.
And that's a good rate, and that's directly attributable to our stellar credit rating among the other states.
Well, it's attributable to several things. One is the physical conservatism of the General Assembly, and the fact that A, we're running budget surpluses, B, we have had one of the strongest rainy day funds in the United States, but it rained a lot last year and we had to use some of it. We always have strong demand for our paper because we're not in the market a lot, which means that we're not constantly coming at them with paper, so we're living within our means. The challenge here is that, as you may have read, the state of Vermont lost one of its AAA bond ratings over the last 3 weeks, and it's solely attributable to unfunded pension liabilities. And just to remind you, we have our unfunded health care liabilities right behind the state of Illinois on a per capita basis. But Vermont just lost one of its AAA bond ratings associated with unfunded pension liabilities, which we have about $15 billion of unfunded pension liabilities on top of the health care, and a depopulating area. So I want you, Jeff, specifically because of where you're sitting right now, I want you to think about what I just said about Vermont and apply it to rural North Carolina, no matter where rural North Carolina happens to be. But in your instance, it's east of 95. So my point of saying all that to you is what's happening in rural North Carolina? Increased pension unfunded liabilities at the city and at the county and at the state level. What's happening in rural North Carolina in many instances? Enormous and not growing unfunded healthcare liabilities. What's happening in eastern North Carolina? Depopulation associated with a lot of factors. So even though we use the word Vermont, we think about it as, obviously as being one of the 50 states, think about not the how, or think about the why. Why did they lose their AAA bond rating? And that's the kind of intensity with which we approach everything at the Treasurer's Office. We're getting ready to approach it this afternoon at the Local Government Commission with some entities that are wanting to borrow money. So my point of going on and on about this is the fact that there's no secret about this. And as far as lowering healthcare costs, increasing transparency, and giving the power to the consumer to consume, there's no turning back from that. Whether it's the President of the United States talking about it or our operationalizing the Clear Pricing Project, there's no turning back on that. I would like nothing better that when this analysis came out over the last 11 months, they would have shown that Vidant was actually a low-cost producer of health care, and that their reimbursement rates were too low, and the Clear Pricing Project would have resulted in them getting more money. I would like nothing better than for that to have happened, and maybe our relationship wouldn't be as soiled as it is today. The complexity of this is that the CEO of Vidant is also the head of the North Carolina Healthcare Association or Hospital Association. So all these attacks against the Clear Pricing Project, it's very difficult for us to differentiate his role as the CEO of Vidant and his role as the head of that lobbying group.
Jeff, do you got anything you want to follow up with?
No, sir. Thank you very much. Very valuable.
Thank you for joining us on the call. Dan, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Is there anybody else on the call today? Well, thank you both. Thank both of you.
Who was that?
I'm sorry, did somebody just say something?
Yeah, this is Travis at WRL, but I don't have any questions.
All right, well, thanks for joining us, Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll let Treasurer Folwell make some final comments.
Yeah, just wanted to make sure you're aware we have a local government commission meeting today, and a lot of these issues regarding health care and what's going on with the credit rating of a lot of cities, a lot of counties, and a lot of water and sewer districts, airport authorities, the whole hospitals, all that stuff eventually flows, in many instances when they want to borrow money, flows through the local government commission. So that meeting is this afternoon, I think at 2:30. If any of y'all need access to hear more about some things that are on that agenda, and that agenda is online, you may just want to go into that agenda and see the things that we're considering. If any of those have a particular intellectual interest to you, intellectually and or geographically. And secondly, next week is our State Health Plan Board meeting, which you can also, you're welcome to visit that in person, or you're welcome to come by. Oh, sorry. State Health Plans tomorrow, local government commissions today.
It's a busy week.
Yeah.
Treasurer, do you have any other comments you'd like to add?
I appreciate your interest, Jeff and Travis and Dan, for joining us. As Frank said, we know there's a lot going on. We're going to have this call every month, even if one person rings in, because that's what we're keepers of the public purse, and that's exactly what I promised the people of North Carolina, and it's what I promised those folks like you who have a job to do. This is not our money, this is your money, and any question at any time, once a month or any time during the month, is something we always welcome. So we appreciate you making the choice today to join us. I'm going to be in Eastern North Carolina a lot next week, and maybe look forward to running across